crash. The sharp, metallic snap pierced the early morning stillness, yanking me out of a dead sleep. It was 5:45 a.m., and my bedroom window faced the cul-de-sac of Oakwood Estates, where I'd lived for barely 6 months. Heart pounding, I stumbled to the blinds, peering into the pre-dawn haze. Nothing moved. No cars, no shadows, just the eerie glow of streetlights on my Jeep Wrangler parked in the driveway. I rubbed my eyes, wondering if I'd imagined the noise, but a nagging instinct told me something was wrong. Grabbing my hoodie, I slipped on sneakers and headed outside to check, my breath fogging in the crisp November air. That's when I saw it, the heavy-duty steering wheel lock on my Jeep. A $150 steel beast designed to stop thieves was sliced clean in half, dangling like a broken toy. My stomach churned, a mix of shock and rage. Taped to the windshield was a note, scrawled in furious red ink. No junk vehicles in my neighborhood. HOA. The words hit like a punch. This wasn't just vandalism. It was a personal attack. And worse, this wasn't just any GPID, was an undercover vehicle for my job with the county police task force, packed with surveillance gear and trackers for busting criminals. Whoever did this had no idea the hornet's nest they'd just kicked. Asterisk, I'm Jake, 32, a detective with the Special Investigations Unit. My Jeep Wrangler with its weathered paint, dented fender, and mud-caked tires might look like a relic to some, but it's a carefully crafted disguise. Hidden under its rugged exterior are encrypted radios, GPS trackers, and concealed cameras used for sting operations, drug busts, trafficking rings, you name it. The Jeep's junk aesthetic is intentional. It blends in, letting me tail suspects without raising eyebrows. To me, it's not just a vehicle. It's a partner in keeping the streets safe. But to Karen, the HOA president of Oakwood Estates, it was a blight on her pristine suburban utopia. Karen, with her peroxide blonde bob, designer tracksuits, and a glare that could melt steel, had been after me since the day I moved in. Her notes about my unkempt Jeep had started as annoyances polite at first, then increasingly hostile. I'd ignored them, too busy chasing felons to care about her petty rules. Cutting my lock, though, that was a felony-level escalation, and I was ready to go to war. Asterisk standing in my driveway, the cold seeping through my sneakers. I took a deep breath to steady myself. My cop instincts kicked in, scanning for evidence. No tire marks on the asphalt. No footprints in the grass. The sliced lock was clean, no jagged edges, suggesting professional-grade bolt cutters. Whoever did this came prepared. I crouched to inspect the damage, my fingers brushing the mangled steel. The lock wasn't just broken, it was a statement. Karen's note, with its capitalized "my neighborhood," screamed entitlement. She thought she owned this place, and my Jeep was a personal insult to her vision of perfection. I pulled the note off the windshield, the tape ripping with a satisfying snap, and stuffed it in my pocket. Evidence. I thought. This wasn't over. Asterisk, my mind raced back to the noise that woke me. It had to be the lock being cut. But how had I missed the culprit? I glanced at the garage, where a small security camera was tucked under the eaves. The last minute, purchased after Karen's first note about my Jeep. I pulled out my phone, opened the app, and rewound to 2:17 a.m. The footage was grainy but clear enough. Karen, in a neon green tracksuit, creeping toward my Jeep, like a budget ninja. She held bolt cutters, her face twisted in determination as she glanced around, clearly thinking she was invisible. She positioned the cutters on the lock, her arms straining, and with a grunt I could almost hear, she snapped it in two. Then she slapped the note on the windshield, gave the Jeep a final glare, and scurried back to her house across the street. My jaw clenched so hard my teeth ached. The audacity of this woman, vandalizing my property in the middle of the night, thinking she'd get away with it. She didn't know who she was messing with, but she was about to find out. Asterisk, I replayed the footage, zooming in on her face. The smugness in her expression fueled my anger, but I forced myself to stay calm. I'd seen worse drug lords, armed robbers, but something about Karen's petty tyranny hit different. This wasn't about crime, it was about control. She'd crossed a line, tampering with a police vehicle, and I wasn't just going to fix the lock and move on. I wanted justice, the kind that would make her think twice before picking up those bolt cutters again. As the sun peeked over the horizon, painting the cul-de-sac in gold, I stood by my Jeep, plotting my next move. Karen had started this fight, but I was going to finish it legally, strategically, and with a story the neighborhood would never forget. Karen wasn't just a nuisance, she was a suburban dictator, ruling Oakwood Estates with the ferocity of a drill sergeant and the pettiness of a reality TV villain. 50-something, with a peroxide blonde bob that looked like it was styled with a ruler, she patrolled the neighborhood like it was her personal kingdom. Her weapon of choice, a clipboard, always tucked under her arm, filled with lists of infractions she'd scribbled down with a smug flourish. Forgot to mow your lawn by Wednesday. Expect a $100 fine and a lecture about community pride. Parked your car a centimeter over the line. She'd slap a neon orange sticker on your windshield. complete with a typed note quoting HOA bylaws or emails, often sent at 3 a.m., were novella-length rants about mailbox colors, garbage can placement, and even the unacceptable shade of someone's front door. Neighbors whispered about her reign of terror over backyard barbecues, but few dared to challenge her. Paying her fines was easier than enduring her wrath. Asterisk, I'd heard the horror stories before I moved in. My neighbor Tom, a retired mechanic, warned me over a beer. Karen's got eyes, like a hawk and a vendetta for anything that doesn't scream model home. He'd once gotten a $200 fine for leaving his garage door open an hour too long. Another neighbor, Sarah, a single mom, was hit with a $50 penalty because her kid's bike was improperly stored on their porch. Karen's rules weren't just strict, they were obsessive. She'd measure the height of your grass with a ruler, photograph your driveway for violations, and once tried to fine an elderly couple for planting tulips instead of the HOA-approved marigolds. The neighborhood wasn't a community. It was her personal stage, and she thrived on control. Asterisk, my run-ins with Karen started the week I moved in. She'd knocked on my door, clipboard in hand, and introduced herself with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Welcome to Oakwood Estates," she'd said, handing me a 20-page HOA handbook. "We have standards here." I nodded politely, but her gaze lingered on my Jeep, parked in the driveway. "That vehicle," she said, her voice dripping with disdain, "needs to be cleaned or moved to the garage. It's lowering property values." I brushed it off, explaining I was a cop and the Jeep was for work. She didn't care. Over the next few months, her notes appeared like clockwork. "Please, wash your vehicle. Unkempt vehicles are not permitted per section 4.2. This is your final warning." I ignored them all. My job tracking drug dealers and human traffickers left little time for waxing my Jeep to appease her ego. Besides, its rugged look was intentional. Undercover vehicles don't shine like show cars. But my silence clearly infuriated her, and the sliced lock was her breaking point. Asterisk, I wasn't the only one she targeted, but I was her favorite. Tom said she'd complained about my Jeep at the last HOA meeting, calling it a disgrace and rallying for stricter vehicle rules. She didn't know it was a police vehicle, and I hadn't advertised its secrecy as part of the job. But her obsession with my Jeep felt personal, like I'd challenged her authority by existing. I'd seen her watching from her porch, binoculars in hand, jotting notes as I left for work. Once she'd cornered me at the mailbox, her voice sharp. "Jake, that Jeep is an embarrassment. Move it or I'll escalate this." I'd smiled, said I'd handle it, and walked away. Escalation, it seemed, meant bolt cutters at 2 a.m. as I stood in my driveway. Staring at the mangled lock, I realized this wasn't just about a vehicle. It was about power, and Karen had just declared war on the wrong guy. Fury surged through me, but years on the task force had taught me to channel anger into strategy. Karen thought she'd won by cutting my lock, but I was about to turn her power trip into a trap she'd never forget. I wasn't just a cap, was a planner, trained to outsmart criminals far craftier than a clipboard-wielding HOA tyrant. Sitting at my kitchen table, coffee in hand, I replayed the security footage, watching Karen's smug expression as she snapped my lock. She thought she was invisible, untouchable, the queen of Oakwood Estates. But every criminal slips up eventually, and I was going to make sure her next move was her last as HOA dictator. Asterisk, I called my buddy Mike, a fellow task force officer with a knack for creative stings and a sense of humor that made even paperwork fun. "Yo, Mike," I said, pacing my living room. "This HOA Karen cut my lock because she thinks my Jeep's an eyesore. Want to help me teach her a lesson?" Mike's laugh crackled through the phone. "She messed with a task force vehicle. Oh, this is gonna be good." We brainstormed over speakerphone, tossing ideas back and forth like kids planning a prank. Except this prank would have legal consequences. The goal wasn't just to catch her, it was to make her regret ever touching my Jeep, all while keeping it by the book. Asterisk, the plan was simple but brilliant. Bait her into striking again. This time on camera, with undeniable evidence of her overstepping. I'd parked the Jeep in the same spot my driveway, where I had every right to keep it but at a twist to make her act. Mike suggested a decoy, a bright red metal lockbox, the kind used for evidence storage, stamped with police property. In bold white letters, it was a $20 hardware store box, but it looked official enough to make Karen's control freak instincts kick into overdrive. "She'll see that and lose her mind," Mike said. "It's like waving a red flag at a bull." I agreed. The box was empty, but to Karen it would scream defiance, a challenge to her authority she couldn't resist. Asterisk, next, we upgraded the surveillance. My existing security camera was good, but I wanted airtight evidence. I drove to an electronics store and picked up a high-end dashcam with night vision, audio, and a wide-angle lens, capable of capturing every detail in crystal clarity. I mounted it inside the Jeep, angled to catch the driver's side and the lockbox in the back. For good measure, I added a second camera, a tiny motion-activated one hidden in a fake rock near the driveway, courtesy of Mike's stash of surveillance. Gear, if she sneaks up again, we'll have her from 2 angles, he said, grinning. No lawyers getting her out of this. Asterisk, but the sting needed one more piece to seal Karen's fate, her own ego. Mike had a stroke of genius. Let's make her think she's on a mission. He said, I'd send an anonymous tip to the HOA board, claiming suspicious activity around my property at night. Karen, as president, would get the email and likely take it upon herself to investigate, especially since she already had my Jeep in her crosshairs. I drafted the tip on a burner email account. Concerned resident here. I've seen someone sneaking around Jake's property at night. Looks suspicious. Please look into it. I sent it to the HOA board, knowing Karen's nosy nature would draw her like a moth to a flame. Asterisk to cover all bases. I called my sergeant to loop her in. Sarge, the HOA president cut my lock. I explained. I'm setting up a sting to catch her tampering again. Just giving you a heads up in case it escalates. She chuckled. Jake, only you'd get into a turf war with an HOA. Keep it legal, and don't make me do paperwork. I assured her it was by the book. Finally, I checked the Jeep's registration with the department, ensuring it was clearly marked as a police vehicle in the system. If Karen touched it again, she'd be tampering with law enforcement, property, serious charge. Asterisk by dusk. The trap was set. The Jeep sat in the driveway, the fake lockbox gleaming in the back. The dash cam and fake rock camera were live, their feeds linked to my phone. The anonymous tip was sent, and I could almost picture Karen reading it, her eyes narrowing as she planned her next move. I leaned back on my couch, sipping a beer, a grin creeping across my face. Karen thought she was the sheriff of Oakwood Estates, but she was about to meet the real law. All I had to do was wait. 2 nights later, my phone buzzed at 1:03 a.m., the dashcam app lighting up with a motion alert. I grabbed it, heart racing, and pulled up the live feed. There she was, Karen, skulking toward my Jeep like a villain in a bad spy movie. Her neon green tracksuit glowed under the streetlights, and her trusty bolt cutters glinted in her hand. She moved with the confidence of someone who thought they owned the night, her eyes darting around the cul-de-sac to ensure no one was watching. Little did she know, I was watching along with 2 cameras capturing every move in high definition. Asterisk Karen circled the Jeep, her lips pursed in that familiar scowl I'd seen during her mailbox ambushes. She paused at the driver's side, inspecting the new steering wheel lock. I'd installed a cheap decoy to keep her focused. Then her gaze locked onto the bait, the bright red evidence lockbox in the back, stamped with police property. In bold white letters, it was like flipping a switch. Her eyes widened, a mix of outrage and glee, as if she'd found the ultimate proof of my defiance. She muttered something under her breath, caught faintly by the dashcam's audio sound, like, "This is unacceptable." She gripped the bolt cutters tighter, her knuckles whitening, and leaned toward the lockbox, clearly debating her next move. Asterisk, I held my breath, crouched in my darkened living room, the phone screen casting a glow on my face. This was the moment she'd seal her fate. Karen reached for the lockbox, her fingers brushing the handle, testing it. She tugged, realized it was locked, and let out an exasperated huff. Then, like a predator sensing victory, she positioned the bolt cutters around the lockbox's padlock, her face set in determination. The dashcam's night vision caught every detail, the sweat on her brow, the twitch of her mouth, the glint of triumph in her eyes. She was about to cross a line that would change everything. Asterisk before she could snap the lock. I hit the speed dial for dispatch, my voice low but steady. This is Detective Jake Carter, Special Investigations. I've got a suspect tampering with a task force vehicle at my residence, Oakwood Estates, requesting immediate backup. Silent approach. The dispatcher confirmed, and I kept my eyes glued to the feed. Karen was still at it, oblivious, her bolt cutters poised for action. She glanced around one last time, then leaned in, ready to cut. That's when the first patrol car turned the corner, its red and blue lights slicing through the darkness without a siren. A second car followed, pulling into the cul-de-sac with the precision of a choreographed takedown. Asterisk, Karen froze, the bolt cutters slipping slightly in her grip. The patrol car stopped, boxing in the driveway, and 2 officers stepped out, their flashlights cutting through the night. "Ma'am, step away from the vehicle." The first officer, a burly guy named Rodriguez, barked. His partner, Officer Lee, flanked him, hand resting casually on her holster. Karen's face went from smug to panicked in a heartbeat, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. This is a junk car," she stammered, waving the bolt cutters, like they'd prove her point. "I'm protecting the neighborhood. It's an eyesore." Asterisk Rodriguez raised an eyebrow, unimpressed. "Ma'am, put the cutters down and step back." Karen hesitated, clutching her clipboard, which she'd somehow brought along like a security blanket. I stepped outside, badge in hand, and approached the scene, keeping my expression neutral. "That's my vehicle," I said, handing Rodriguez my ID. "It's registered to the County Police Task Force." Lee ran the plates on her radio, and within seconds, dispatch confirmed. "Vehicle is law enforcement property. assigned to Special Investigations. Asterisk. Karen's face drained of color, her eyes darting between me and the officers. Police, she squeaked. But, it's hideous. It's lowering property values. Rodriguez didn't crack a smile. Tampering with a police vehicle is a serious offense. Ma'am, we'll need your statement. Karen's bravado crumbled as she realized the hole she'd dug. She tried to backpedal, claiming she was just checking the lockbox, but the dashcam footage already downloading to my laptop would tell a different story. I caught her eye and gave a small nod, letting her know I'd seen everything. She looked away, her reign as HOA queen crumbling under the weight of her own arrogance. The fallout from Karen's bolt-cutter blunder was a spectacle I'll never forget, a glorious unraveling of her suburban tyranny that felt like justice served with a side of popcorn. As officers Rodriguez and Lee stood in my driveway, their flashlights pinning Karen like a deer in headlights, her usual bravado melted into pure panic. Her neon green tracksuit seemed to glow with her desperation as she clutched her clipboard. Stammering, I was just protecting the neighborhood. That Jeep is a disgrace. Her voice cracked, loud enough to echo off the cold Usac's cookie cup. Houses Rodriguez, a grizzled veteran with zero patience for nonsense. Cut her off. Ma'am, you tampered with a law enforcement vehicle. That's not an HOA issue, it's a crime. Karen's jaw dropped, her eyes darting wildly as if searching for an escape. For the first time, the Queen of Oakwood Estates was cornered, and I savored every second. Asterisk, I stepped forward, badge in hand, keeping my expression neutral, despite inwardly grinning. That's my vehicle, I said, handing Rodriguez my ID. County Police, Special Investigations Unit. Lee radioed dispatch, and within seconds, they confirmed. Vehicle registered aggregation to county law enforcement, assigned to S. Karen's face went from pale to ghostly, her hands trembling as she gripped the citation papers Rodriguez handed her. The charges were no slap on the wrist. Vandalism for cutting my original lock, attempted theft for touching the decoy lockbox, and property damage, all backed by the high-def dashcam footage I'd already backed up to my laptop and the cloud. You'll hear from the department, Rodriguez said, his tone final. Karen tried one last defense, muttering about property values, but Lee just shook her head. Save it for the judge, ma'am. As the officers escorted her back to her house, I caught Karen's eye and gave a small nod. She looked away, her reign crumbling under the weight of her own arrogance. Asterisk. By sunrise, the neighborhood was buzzing. My phone lit up with texts from neighbors who'd seen the patrol cars. Tom, the retired mechanic next door, called me at 7 a.m., laughing so hard he could barely speak. Jake, you got her. She's done. Sarah, the single mom who'd been fined for her kid's bike, sent a string of clapping emojis and a "You're my hero." Even the elderly couple with the tulip garden dropped by with a plate of cookies, saying, "We've been waiting for someone to stand up to her." Karen's reign had alienated almost everyone, and her midnight stunt was the spark that ignited a rebellion. I shared the dashcam footage with the HOA board's vice president, Linda, a quiet accountant who'd long been steamrolled by Karen. "This changes everything," Linda said, her eyes wide as she watched the video. "We're calling an emergency meeting." Asterisk. The meeting took place Saturday evening in the community center, a bland room with fluorescent lights and folding chairs. Over 40 neighbors showed up, a record for the usually ignored HOA gatherings. Karen sat in the front row, her face a mask of defiance but her eyes puffy, like she'd spent the week crying. Linda took the podium, her voice steady but firm. "We have evidence of serious misconduct by our president, Karen Thompson." I'd given her the footage, and she'd set up a projector. The room fell silent as the video played. Karen sneaking toward my Jeep at 1 a.m., bolt cutters gleaming, muttering unacceptable as she reached for the lockbox. Gasps turned to chuckles, then outright laughter as the patrol cars appeared. Catching her mid-crime, someone in the back yelled, "Busted." Karen sank lower in her chair, her usual clipboard nowhere in sight. Asterisk. The board moved fast. After a fiery debate, mostly neighbors, airing years of grievances, Karen was ousted as president by a unanimous vote. Linda listed her offenses: harassment, misuse of authority, and criminal vandalism. Karen tried to speak, claiming she was protecting the community. But Tom cut her off, recounting her $200 fine for his garage door. Sarah shared her bike fine story. The tulip couple mentioned their flowerbed saga. The room erupted in stories of Karen's petty tyranny, each one fueling the crowd's resolve. She was banned from future board roles, and a new rule was proposed: no fines without board approval. The cheers were deafening. Asterisk. By Monday, the story was neighborhood legend. Someone posted the footage to a local Facebook group, and it went viral. In our small town, racking up thousands of views, "Don't pull a Karen" became the cul-de-sac's catchphrase. I heard Karen listed her house for sale, unable to face the daily whispers and pointed fingers. The department reimbursed me for the lock, and my sergeant gave me a nod. "Nice work, Carter, but maybe pick a neighborhood without an HOA next time." At the next HOA meeting, I played the footage again for stragglers, earning roars of laughter and applause. My Jeep still sits in the driveway, unwashed and proud, a symbol that you don't mess with a cop's ride, especially a task force vehicle. Karen learned that the hard way, and Oakwood Estates is free at last.